was just a major judicial judgment on ICE and ICE in Chicago. Um, Apparently, she scrambled this judgment together pretty quickly to suggest that ICE is out of line with what's happening in Chicago. Could you play a little bit again for David Katz, just to reset that, Albert, that piece that you ran before? So
give me like
ICE,
30 seconds to pull that back up.
Yeah, no problem. I just was going to say ICE has come in very heavy-handedly in Chicago, and heavy-handedly pretty much everywhere they've shown up. Unclear sometimes even if there are ICE agents involved. Faces are concealed. Oftentimes they are wearing clothing that has no real visible markings associated with a government authority or law enforcement authority of any kind. And so in Chicago, they rappelled into a neighborhood, as you're aware, out of a Black Hawk helicopters. It was just a really bizarre scene with tear gas and the like. So the latest incident in Chicago now has gotten some clapback from a judge. Here's a little bit.
To convene a last-minute hearing this morning to say she is, quote, startled by videos she is seeing of ICE's tactics on the streets of Chicago. Now, she says she has, quote, serious concerns that the federal law enforcement agents she is seeing are not following her orders in the Windy City. Her statement comes as CNN obtains new video that shows a Border Patrol agent tackling and pinning a 19-year-old outside of a Walgreens store in Chicago.
He's a citizen! He's a citizen! He's a citizen! He's a citizen! That's my brother-in-law! Get away from me! You don't know what's going on, so get the back!
And of course, that detention ended up in the Walgreens store with ICE agents chasing the person through the Walgreens store. And again, these are Border Patrol agents tackling apparently a U.S. citizen in Chicago. It's just one high-profile incident that's been recorded by bystanders, but it's the judge's decision that orders ICE to wear body cameras and to, in some way, back off in their tactics, or at least a re-examination of their tactics. And I'm wondering if you can comment on this and its potential effect on the way ICE policy might move forward.
Well, the judge's order seems to me very proper. It's great that the judge did this on short notice, on short time, because Trump's depredations on our cities so far, just to mention them, he moves fast and he counts on the courts moving slow. That's a little bit what happened in Los Angeles. But now I think these judges around the country have all of that for context. And they're really ready to go. And of course, the states are ready to go. They have their attorneys ready to go to court and to ask for these orders from federal judges on shortened time. So the state of California now has boosted its number of lawyers. Illinois, Oregon, they're really ready for Trump to do these things that he's been doing with ICE, and also trying to put the military in there. And so, as you know, and we can come back to that, they are not allowed to be deployed. A federal judge appointed by Trump has stopped the deployment of federal troops in Oregon, in Portland. It's really a wonderful turn of events where we do have the rule of law. My optimism has been borne out by the reality on the ground, at least so far in Oregon. In Chicago, they're there on many false premises and pretenses, but one of them, the Border Patrol is there, and people may ask themselves, that's not near the border. What are they doing there? They have this fiction that Lake Michigan is the beginning of an international border with Canada. No, it's not. So they have no right to be in Chicago whatsoever. That's something that the courts have to ponder. And on top of that, as you can see there, they're obviously picking on someone who, from all appearances, is a citizen. And so what on earth is going on there? So the judge has said that they have to wear a body camera, and a judge has a right to pursue and enforce, to order remedies that look like they're going to solve the problem. These are what we call courts of equity. And a judge has a right to do something that is an equitable solution, and to make them where so many disputes where ICE keeps saying, well, they started it. And all the evidence, including from journalists and bystanders, people who are taking videos of it, looks like ICE started it. But ICE keeps insisting, no, they started it. Well, the body cameras will at least give us some insight. It will give us some view into who started it, how these situations, Mark, are really unfolding. And now she'll have evidence in court. She can hold people in contempt, and she can make findings and not have to take the government's word for it. One last thing, the judge in Oregon said that Trump's position is totally untethered from the facts. And so while deference is due to the president in these kinds of decisions, deference doesn't mean the president can just act like a dictator, act like a thug, and do whatever he wants. There has to be some factual basis. How are you going to have a factual basis, especially because they've been shown to target journalists, to do all of these militaristic things to journalists, to beat them, to intimidate them. In LA, they shot at a journalist, apparently intentionally. I hope they'll get to the bottom of that. So this way there'll be a record, Mark.
The optimistic, as you suggest, disposition toward the judicial system suggests that these judges and their what they've handed down in these judicial decisions, even temporary judicial decisions, in some way sort of stop the bleeding associated with the heavy-handed way in which ICE is coming into America's cities. Does it concern you sort of from a jetliner view, like if you just step back a little farther, that the judges and judicial appointments are getting cored out by this administration? That is to say, there'll be replacements of many of these judges who are now making these rulings by judges who are just toadies of this administration?
Well, in terms of the judges being toadies of the administration, Mark, I think a lot of the people in the cabinet, in the administrative agencies are absolutely toadies. But I don't think the judges are. You have to remember, these are federal judges. These aren't even the immigration judges that, yes, he's played some games with immigration judges who don't have life tenure and don't have the protections that we think about with the Article 3 federal judges. But the Article 3 federal judges, the district judges who are hearing these cases, the appellate judges who are reviewing these cases, have life tenure. They have the marshals to protect them. They have a lot of insulation. And I think very few of them would be fairly called toadies for the administration, as I think we're seeing from the rulings. This ruling in Portland, for instance, is standing up. Now, there's a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit, which put in an administrative stay, and then Trump tried to exploit that, but he hasn't been able to do so yet. And even that 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit, which has two very, I won't call them Trumpy, they were picked by Trump. One of them is a Clinton, is from the Clinton era, Judge Graber. The other two were picked by Trump first term, but so far they haven't ruled. Now, they may break my heart tomorrow and allow these authoritarian tactics, these militaristic tactics to be deployed. But, you know, what's funny, Mark, is that they keep saying, these lawyers for the administration, these Trumpy lawyers that he sends into court, they keep saying, well, you know, they're just to protect these federal buildings. That's totally untrue. If they want to just protect the federal courthouse, first of all, there's something called the Federal Protective Service, Mark, that does a very adequate job of protecting the federal courthouses. We had them here. They were protecting the FBI. There was nothing to protect. There were no demonstrations. There was nothing. There were just a bunch of Marines hanging around. I had to go to the FBI one day. I talked to the Marines. One of them turned out to have the same name as me. We started chatting. I talked to another one, National Guard. Nice fellow, because I had to wait so long and there was nothing happening. There was no reason for all of this deployment out there. But, you know, so we've seen, I guess, hopefully, optimistic signs that this has gotten Trump to back off. And I'll say one other thing, too. I think people are seeing this around the country and they're really repulsed. You know, ordinary people, people who don't have a real stake in politics, people who don't even care very much, you know, one way or the other about the whole, immigration situation. They just see this and they say, wait, these are, you know, this is Trump sending thugs out into the streets to do things that really aren't necessary. Like in Portland, they can protect the buildings. But Trump, while his lawyers say they're going to just protect the buildings, what they really want to do when they get there is protect the personnel, which means having Marines go out with the ICE agents. This is totally against the posse comitatus law, against what the Constitution and our statutes provide. We don't send the military against American citizens, as Trump says, against America's enemies, by which he means the Democrats. We send them against foreign enemies. We don't send them into American cities. And on the pretense, Mark, that they can go around and protect ICE agents because they're federal personnel, that means they can go anywhere that the ICE agents go. And I don't want this for the future. I want this to stop now and in the future. But people who think this is great when they're protecting ICE agents, how about if they're protecting IRS agents? How about when the Democrats get back into power and you got all these tax cheats running around in Texas? So what, we're going to send the California National Guard, we're going to send the military, a Democratic president, and they can go anywhere that the federal personnel go. Except now it's not federal personnel ICE in California. Now it's federal personnel IRS agents in Texas. Do you like that, good old boys? Do you think that's great for America's future?
Joy is saying federal courts will be shut down starting next week. So, yeah, what about that, David?
Well, actually, I just called had to call the U.S. Attorney's Office yesterday, and I also had to call the pretrial and probation service of the federal courts yesterday, and they are not closing down. Apparently, what people are talking about here are civil cases, and yes, if you have a federal civil case, but for one of these injunctions trying to stop Trump from doing something, the courts will be open. And for federal criminal cases, a lot of them are being continued. And I know that I saw, like everyone does, I tuned into David K. Johnston when he's on your show. I thought it was wonderful a couple of days ago. And he was talking about this idea of the courts being closed, and therefore when Trump might go around and have his thugs, his minions, just arrest people. I don't think that's going to happen. This is America, and I think that is not going to happen. He, as unpopular as he is now, and as many people will show up for the No More Kings or No Kings demonstrations this weekend, this Saturday, everyone should show up if they possibly can.
You mean the I Hate America rally, as it's called by MAGA Mike Johnson?
I love American Freedom Rally. I love American democracy. I hope people turn out by the millions for it. But my point is that he would be even more unpopular if that were to happen. And if that really were to happen, some federal thugs show up and they just grab somebody off the street, and they take him. And the idea is, well, the courts will be closed. There'll be no habeas corpus. There'll be nothing they can do. The magistrate judges are sitting. The pretrial services officer would write a report and say this person just got detained and there was no basis for it. And this person is no danger to flee, no danger of not showing up, and they'd be released on a bond just like that. They'd be processed, I think, by the magistrate judges and by the pretrial services offices of the federal courts, and they'd be released right away. So if people are thinking that the Democrats ought to not stand united and ought to not stand up and require before they approve stopping the shutdown, that these medical programs be continued, that people's premiums not double, that 20 million people not be cut off of their medical programs. If they are worried that, well, next thing we're going to be rounding up people off the streets and the Democrats ought to cave in before there's arrests and no habeas corpus. Please don't think that way. We're going to have the rule of law. And I agree with Minority Leader Schumer in the Senate on this. And I agree with him shutting down the government. Trump would have fired people anyway. And if he's firing 4,000 people from the agencies, guess what? He would have fired them anyway. Those people are going to have to go to court when this is over, get their jobs back, get their back pay. Trump would fire them with a shutdown, without a shutdown. He'd do some of the terrible things he's doing right now with a shutdown, without a shutdown. This is the time to stand up, show the Democrats are united, show that they're fighting on the economic issues that the Democrats have always stood up for, Mark, that the Democrats are known for. They're the party of the working people, of working families, and not of the super rich. And this is the time to make that clear to the swing voters.
I think it's a great message. I think that's a great message and you're right. This is a moment in time to send that message and make that message clear. But just to your point about firing federal employees, I go to San Francisco. U.S. District Judge Susan Ilston in San Francisco saying the cuts appear politically motivated and were being carried out without much thought. And it's very much ready, fire, aim on most of these programs. And it has a human cost, she wrote. It's a human cost that cannot be tolerated. She granted a temporary restraining order blocking the cuts sought by labor unions, saying that she believed evidence would ultimately show the job cuts were illegal and in excess of authority. This is after federal agencies started laying people off and reducing the size of government yet again. And this is a part of a broader strategy, as you know, to dismantle America governmentally and the administrative state, et cetera. We've talked about Russell Vogt, OMB. But So that's an injunctive order, is it not?
She's a wonderful judge in the Bay Area. I've had the pleasure, the privilege to appear in front of her. I knew she would get this one right as soon as I saw that she was the judge on this case. And these firings are beyond the power of the president. There's civil service protections. There's all these kinds of things. And, you know, Trump says they'll never get their jobs back. They're gone forever. They're a bunch of Democrat agency people, and I'm getting rid of them. Then he sends his lawyers into court and they say, oh, what partisanship, Your Honor. That's the first thing that they say. Trump says the bad part right out loud. He makes the position of those lawyers totally untenable, and they ought to not BS these courts. Try to tell a court that, oh, this is all nonpartisan. The records are going to all come out, Mark. They're going to show how incredibly partisan it was. And then the judge is looking at Trump's own statement, which the whole world knows. And the judge from the Trump, the prosecutor, the counsel for the Trump administration, the lawyer for the government, is trying to tell her, no, what's that called? Gaslighting her, telling her, don't believe all the statements that are coming out of Trump, that these are partisan and they're aimed at, quote, Democrat agencies and, quote, supposedly the all Democrats who work there. But on top of that, Mark, you know, what they're doing about the saying that, oh, well, it's not, here was what the government lawyers argued to Judge Ilston. The government lawyers said, you know, these people haven't even been fired yet. They'll have lots of opportunity after they're fired. They can try to get their jobs back. They can try to get back pay. Meanwhile, Trump said, I'm not going to give you back pay, and I'm not going to ever take you back into the government. So, of course, they're suffering irreparable harm. And of course, it made sense for her to issue her order right now and to stop the firings right now. He argues one thing to the world, and then he sends his lawyers in to argue the opposite to the court. And no lawyer should do that. That people are going to lose their bar cards and be sanctioned and disciplined over this sort of stuff. This is what Giuliani got Giuliani in trouble. Remember, Giuliani would run out there, he'd make some speech, we're going to show this, we're going to show that, and then he'd get into court and he'd either argue the opposite or say, no, we don't really have any evidence.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the evidence is coming. I left the evidence in my other pants, Your Honor. Let me just go back and get it. I love that you showed that picture of Trump in court, Albert, because Trump is now saying he might go to the Supreme Court to personally watch oral arguments on whether the bulk of his tariffs are legit. This would be highly unusual. He said, quote, I think I'm going to go to the Supreme Court to watch it. I've not done that, and I had some pretty big cases. I think it's one of the most important cases ever brought because we will be defenseless against the world. Again, he's talking about the tariffs and the statutory legitimacy of them, right? So it strikes me as that scene from The Godfather where, the old mobster comes in and he can barely speak English, but they put him there at the back of the courtroom, and it's a flex, it's a move. And I wonder if you can just speak to it. It sort of has to do with both the overlap of law and the overlap of image and leverage of Donald Trump.
No sitting president has ever appeared in the U.S. Supreme Court while it's in session during an argument. Never. They say that Nixon, I guess, when he was out of office, had a case. He actually appeared as a lawyer. Talk about how much more talented Nixon was. He had some of the same defects morally as Trump, but talk about the greater talent that he had, that he was actually hired to argue for somebody as their Supreme Court lawyer. But no sitting president has ever appeared in the Supreme Court. And I hope Trump goes because I think it shows, the puppet, the puppet and the puppeteer. Sure. And this idea that he put 3 people on the Supreme Court who are going to decide the case, this kind of goes in one ear and out the other. It won't go in one ear and out the other when Trump shows up, and they'll breathlessly report this, and they'll talk about how he pushed Kavanaugh over the line. We'll be able to see Kavanaugh's disgraceful hearings where, he blasted the Clintons, he blasted everybody else. He was people who say, well, how on earth can Bondi and Patel act like that in front of people in the Senate? We'll remember how Kavanaugh acted in front of senators. And then we'll see Gorsuch. We'll go over again that Merrick Garland got held back, and Amy Coney Barrett. There wasn't enough time to get Garland in there, but there was all the time in the world 2 weeks before the election for McConnell and the Republicans to push her through. And we'll get into Alito and we'll get into Thomas and, how they're so knee-jerk reaction voting for Trump. And there will be Trump. So Trump will make that even clearer, and it won't help the argument about the tariffs. And I still think that they're going to rule against him on the tariffs. It's also more in his face if he showed up for the argument and then they rule against him. He says it's the most important case of the term. And then we see very well that life returns to normal, right? Or everything returns to normal. We don't need these tariffs. They're talking about, Mark, how much money the tariffs bring in because they don't calculate how much higher the costs are to the consumers. So they collect $1 in tariffs, and Trump trumpets the fact that he's got an extra $1. He's taking $1 off the deficit. That's money that he can go give to the farmers to try to buy votes for the Republicans in these farm states. Meanwhile, he doesn't talk about the fact that for the $1 he just got, our prices went up $3.
Yeah, that's good. That dollar comes from American consumers, but it's even worse than that. Of course, I was detailing in the first hour that $40 billion in those dollars is going to Argentinian interests. To prop up the Argentinian economy, which is dropping like a stone. And the reason for that is because there's so many hedge funders. I mean, these are very good friends of Scott Bessent and the Billionaires Boys Club that is in Washington around Donald Trump. They are heavily invested in Argentina. So they are taking a bath as that economy gets dragged onto its side. And so it started with $20 billion. Now America is going to throw another $20 billion at it. So it's $40 billion going into Argentinian interests. And by the way, they are soybean farmers also. And now they are discounting their soybean. The soybean exports are going to China, the very consumers, Chinese consumers, that aren't coming to the U.S. anymore because of U.S. tariffs on China. So if you can follow the bouncing ball, we are subsidizing Argentinian economic interest to screw our own farmers and then paying them off with checks from the same pot of gold that you're talking about, the tariffs. I mean, it seems complicated, but it's really not. I mean, we're screwing over our own people while we're shoveling money to interests associated with hedge fund operators in America. It's crazy.
Mark, it's great that you explain it so well. Unfortunately, it doesn't get explained that well, and people don't really focus on it. But it's a perfect example of how, Trump and the Republicans are not for the average person. They're for Wall Street. I worked on Wall Street. I was on the law review. I got hired by one of the Wall Street firms. I worked there in the summer of 1979. We had these international clients. Believe me, I get it. And Wall Street gets very, very invested in some of these companies. And if the bet wins, they make a huge amount of money. If the bet loses, they go to the government for the bailouts. And they say, oh my God, we didn't make 50% profit on those loans and on our dealings with Argentina and those bonds that we sold them. Oh my God, they didn't repay us. You got to bail them out now. And that's like, tails we win. Tails we win, heads you lose.
Heads you lose. Yeah. No,
we either make the money that in the great capitalist system on Wall Street, they make that money, Mark, because they're so wise and they've invested so well in survival of the fittest. They're the fittest who survive. And if they lose the bet, then they go to the government and they get the bailouts. And this has happened over and over again in American history. And
socializing the losses on Wall Street. I want to quickly just get to the Supreme Court. We're on the Supreme Court and the fact that Trump may attend the decision on tariffs, which we were just speaking of. There is right now the Voting Rights Act being talked about, and the conservative justices I'm reading appear likely to strip Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of all power to protect against racially discriminatory redistricting. And again, this is in arguments, this case, Louisiana versus, is it Calais? This is going down this week. But without getting into too many specifics, although the specifics I think are interesting, it really opens up the kind of redistricting and drawing of districts that is designed, at least in the case of some of these southern states particularly, to severely exclude a lot of minority voices from the vote.
Do we have a few minutes, Mark? Just a few minutes.
Please, go ahead.
Such a major decision, the Voting Rights Act. So the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution after the Civil War gave the vote. 13th Amendment ended slavery. 14th Amendment gave rights to the newly emancipated slaves. And the 15th Amendment gave them voting rights. And then notwithstanding that, Reconstruction stopped. We got Jim Crow in the South. We had Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal. And this went on and on until, the Great Society, LBJ, he got the votes to get this Voting Rights Act through. And one of the issues were minorities going to always remain minority? Were they going to have any representation? And there were just a real handful of African-American senators, and I don't think there were any, but there were some African-American Congress members, but they were so few. And so all of the country banded together and thought this was a good idea, including the Republicans too, to have what turned out to be what they call majority minority districts. If you think about it, a southern state like Louisiana, if it's 60 to 40 white, and there's also preference, unfortunately, white people tend not to vote for black candidates. And those statistics are borne out, and those statistics were presented yesterday in the Supreme Court and in all of the briefs. When you have that pattern, how are minority voters, let's say, going to have any representation? You could gerrymander, since the U.S. Supreme Court allows that, Mark. You could gerrymander a southern 60-40% white state so that every single congressional district would be 60-40 white, and there would be no black representatives, no black members of Congress. That's about to happen in the South. If the Supreme Court goes the wrong way on this case, and it looks like they may very well do so, someone has redrawn the map, which would show gerrymandered southern states with no black Congress members in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. There'd be a couple of pockets where there are so many black people in Atlanta area and in the area around Durham, North Carolina, that yes, you'd have black representatives from there, but you'd have a lily white South. This is not what they passed the 15th Amendment to achieve, and this is not what they passed the Voting Rights Act to achieve. And yet the conservative members of the Supreme Court, including apparently Chief Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh, seem about ready to go that way. And they say, well, affirmative action. First of all, this is not affirmative action. This is an act of Congress. It doesn't have an end date. But Kavanaugh kept pointing out that, well, affirmative action was supposed to have an end date of 30, 35 years. We'd all be kumbaya, blacks and other minorities would be on a totally equal footing. It wouldn't matter in America whether you were born black or you were born white, you were born Anglo or Hispanic. Oh, come on. But anyway, Kavanaugh said that, shouldn't this have an end date? And the answer to having an end date is, first of all, it's not kumbaya. It's, like I said, they showed the statistics, Mark, that unfortunately, whites tend not to vote for black candidates. And this cuts across, and it cuts across the other way too. And the specific issue in the case is this second majority black district in Louisiana. So, this argument that they can't use race to do something about race, yes, maybe that's, for after we achieve that wonderful nirvana that only the conservatives on the Supreme Court act like we've achieved. We haven't achieved it. And this is the reality. Anyway, if they rule against, and it sounds from the questions, Mark, and the way that they were tilting, that they are going to rule against the Voting Rights Act, there's ways to not do it quite so drastically. What it might be is that when they gerrymandered it, there would be an argument. There'd be sort of a balance, how much of it was political, how much of it was racial. Maybe you could show that it was more racial. You get lucky, you'd have some statement by some legislator that backed up your argument that it really was racial. Because what I call the white supremacists in the South are arguing, the white supremacists in the South are arguing, they make a very argument. We're not white supremacists. This is purely political. We want more Republicans. We don't care if they're white or black. We want more Republicans. And there are, of course, a couple of black members of Congress who are Republican. But I tell you, let's see how long that really would last if there were not majority minority districts. Again, your listeners, majority minority means that while blacks and Hispanics are minorities in the country, there are areas carved out which include race in carving them out so that they'll have a chance of winning. And that's what the Voting Rights Act said, a right to participate in America. A right to participate means also to elect somebody of your own color. If it's an 80% black area, and they want to elect a black person, if it's a 40%, if you make those two 40% black areas, and especially with this preference voting for white candidates, you end up with two white candidates. Now, there's all sorts of political science arguments why some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't make sense. You end up having some very extreme members of Congress. That's true. Would there really be more moderate, but still Democratic leaning? Who knows? But I don't think the Supreme Court ought to go this way, but it looks like they're going to, Mark. That's my Katz, that they're going to cut back this section of the Voting Rights Act and make it harder to use race And this is race as a cure. This is not race, in a pejorative way. There do need to be some remedies. I didn't say so. The entire Congress said so. And the Voting Rights Act, Mark, was passed again, including by Republicans.
Yeah, this is interesting because you're apparently joined by a lot of legal analysts who share the voice on this one, that it looks like this Supreme Court is going to rule with the whites, if I can put it. I mean, it really is a white-black thing. I hate to say it. I mean, it's such a pathetic situation that we find ourselves in, but it does look that way. There was a super chat that came in. I wanted to ask you about it.
And then, Mark, do I have 2 minutes for one topic? I never like to suggest topics, but can I suggest one today? That
sure, go ahead, of course. Yeah.
You want to do the super chat first, or can I do mine?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't. It doesn't matter. Let me give you the super chat first, just because I've got it right here. Luis says, please address the puppy killers TSA ad. Okay, that's Christy Nome. I don't call people names per se, but if someone has it in there, I will read it within reason. Playing at airports nationwide. This is this TSA Department of Homeland Security video. That's a clear violation of the Hatch Act. How much cash is wasted on this campaign? Indeed, as I've said before, one of the things that this particular crew loves to do at Department of Homeland Security, Christy Nome does, dress up in camo. She likes to hold a weapon. She likes to pose alongside various military and law enforcement people, and she likes to make videos. They all like to make videos. Hegseth likes to make a video. He's got a makeup office there, right, when you go into the Pentagon. I mean, and to be fair, I mean, to the idea, they really know messaging is important, and they're messaging all the time. And Democrats could take a page from this, although I wish there was governance going on more than messaging, but messaging's a big part of politics. Anyway, it's against that backdrop that she does this thing during the government shutdown. They're running that video that I've described, saying it's the Democrats' fault, and sorry for your delay here at TSA, but the Democrats have closed the government. Isn't that a violation, yet another violation of this Hatch Act, which prohibits the politicization of any message or any kind of governmental position? And you cannot use American taxpayer dollars to promulgate this position. In this case, this video is a violation of the Hatch Act.
Well, of course it is. And come the restoration, everyone will be called to account for all of their wrongdoing during these 4 years. That's kind of the least of the wrongdoing. But yes, it's totally improper. Some of the airports have said that they won't run it, especially in blue states. There are things that they can do to sort of stop them from running it with that script. I do have to say this because I try to be nonpartisan. Not right, not left, just right, not wrong. I know some people think that I'm pretty far left for someone who says not right, not left. But I try to call them as I see them. Ali Mayorkas, when he was DHS secretary, he had a video running at the airport too. While you waited in those long lines, you had to watch his video. But of course, it was more fact-based. It wasn't. Hers always looked like a cheesy movie's about to start. Right?
Well, this is a huge distinction. Wait a minute. This video says,
yes, of course,
you have the Democrats to thank for your wait today. They have closed down the government. That is a day's drive from anything Mayorkas produced.
But Mark, all I'm saying is that this idea of performing all the time, before that, there wasn't a video. There wasn't a video at the airport as you waited. Yes, now they've taken this to a whole different level. His was informative, of course, had him performing and has her performing, but in a totally crass, partisan way. What I wanted to say, Mark, is because we now have the Dodgers and the Milwaukee Brewers playing, and I know you do have some sports fans out there. And I'm very torn in this because my wife is from Wisconsin. I've been going back to Wisconsin, to her college town, since 1990. So you can imagine we are very torn. But I'm going with my cousin today. The game starts really early out here. It's the afternoon game today, the Dodgers and the Milwaukee Brewers. But I had a famous case with Tommy Lasorda. So do I have 60 seconds for my Tommy Lasorda criminal defense?
Tell everybody who Tommy Lasorda was.
So Tommy Lasorda was the longtime manager of the Dodgers, wonderful character, and garrulous, charming sort of fellow. So he did these, they did these infomercials, and they do this kind of stuff. And the people who asked him to do this, he had no idea that they were any different from anyone else. He thought no reason to think they were totally legitimate. But it turned out they were running a tax scam, and they were going to overvalue the audio tapes that he was making. And they got a huge bunch. I prosecuted this case. Tommy Lasorda was my star witness back in 1989. He'd won the World Series in 1988 for the Dodgers, the famous one against the Oakland A's with the Kirk Gibson home run, 1988. So I have Tommy in this case, and they get a huge bunch of orders, and they tell Tommy, we have to get this thing done by the end of the year. It's part of the whole program. Tommy says, I'm not coming in over Christmas. Are you crazy? I'll come in January 15th. So Mark, what they have to do, or what they decide to do, is to give him a bunch of checks, which they've dated like December 27, 28. They phony up all the logs to show that he's made the tapes December 27, 28. And so I need Tommy Lasorda as a witness for my backdating to show that these folks were not entitled to the tax benefit that they were selling to, people who wanted to get tax breaks. They weren't entitled to them, Mark. And they also were certainly not entitled to them in that year because they weren't made in the year that they were purported to be made. So I have Tommy Lasorda on the stand, and he and his agents did not want to be on the stand. No how, no way, but I needed him. I couldn't stipulate to his testimony. So Tommy takes the stand in federal court, 1989. I'm the prosecutor on the case. And I ask him, Mr. Lasorda, is there any chance that you walked around, with those checks in your wallet? Maybe you carried them around. You got them on the 27th or 28th. You carried them around until the 17th or 18th of January. And that's why they were deposited then. And Tommy says, no way. I hammer all checks. And I said to him, Tommy, even your Dodgers check? It just came into my mind. And he said, yep, I even hammer my Dodgers check. So in those days, we had a tabloid, the Herald Examiner, Mark, and it had that headline that I still have up in my office here somewhere that said, Tommy, I hammer my Dodgers check. So we don't know what Roberts is going to do. Hopefully Roberts has direct deposit. He doesn't hammer his Dodgers check. But
well, the Dodgers appear to be in pretty good control of this series. So
I met Oral Hershiser on the case. Do I have 30 seconds for that story, Mark? Or do you have
Albert? He's off on this crazy Dodgers thing. This is what happens when you. This is like if you were the legal analyst, and all Albert wanted to talk about is how I defended a case against the Warriors player. Go ahead, Katz. Tell us your Dodgers story. Oral Hershiser. Tell everybody who Oral Hershiser is.
So Oral Hershiser was the famous pitcher. He's still the announcer for the Dodgers, but he was their famous pitcher from 1988. I think he was the MVP of the World Series. He had the scoreless inning streak. And I got to meet him on that case along with the IRS agent because we interviewed Tommy out at Dodger Stadium. And Tommy was pitching a health drink at the time. And I showed up with a rather corpulent IRS special agent. And Tommy is trying to pitch her on drinking, getting us some of the drink. And she's just like, I cannot accept any gratuities from an interviewee. I cannot accept the health drink. No way. Let's get on with the interview. Tommy pushes a button and Oral Hershiser shows up. And he's got a sample of the health drink, which he tries to serve to the reluctant IRS special agent. And I shook his hand there. And I got to tell my story, Mark. Come on.
That's great. No, it's really great. I remember meeting Tommy Lasorda several times when I was doing Good Day LA in Los Angeles, and he told a story off the air in the hallway, and it was about somebody who was very sick in the hospital, and he went to see him. And I'm telling you, Lasorda could get, somebody with 1 foot in the grave out of their hospital bed. He's that inspiring when he speaks. He's one of the most impressive speakers, either intimately, like in the hallway when he was telling the story to me, and it was me, I think, and 2 other people, and or at a big dinner or on television when he's on the dais somewhere. I mean, he was wonderful that when you could see how he could motivate players to play for him, players to extend themselves for him. Quite the character. And then, of course, that Dodgers team was so great with Oral Hershiser, and I think you guys are going to win it again. Looks like I don't see how even with your Ohtani slumping, you guys are putting runs on the board, and the pitching's all stepping up. So good luck. All right, Katz, tell us another story about who you met next time we see you.
It's sort of the best team money can buy, but other teams spend money like the best. Sure, don't seem to get there.
You're allowed to spend money.
Rest in peace, Tommy.
Well, look, indeed, rest in peace. We'll look for you across the media landscape, and we'll see you next Thursday. The great David Katz, everybody. Bye, David.
Mark.
See you. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell, you'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.